Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. If you're joining us for this session, you are stepping into a seriously fascinating area of study. Today, we're diving straight into Chapter 1, Introduction to Young Children with Exceptionalities. You know, whether you're aiming for a career in education, maybe psychology, or honestly, if you just want to better understand the wildly diverse ways human beings develop, this foundation is absolutely critical. We're going to rely pretty heavily on some core recall questions to test your knowledge as we go, so definitely get ready to think critically.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. Today we're covering who are exceptional children, understanding the IDEA law, delays and special needs, gifted and twice exceptional learners, educational programs and services, and we'll wrap up with inclusion and natural environments. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Who are exceptional children? Before we can really talk about exceptionalities, we just need to make sure we're all completely on the same page about the specific age group and the terminology we'll be using. So, let's kick things off with a quick recall question for you. True or false? The young children age group covers children from birth through 8 years old. Think about it for a second. Well, the answer is true. Early childhood professionals treat this very specific age range, literally from the day they are born all the way up to age 8, as its own entirely distinct group. And that's because it's a time of just massive, rapid brain development, which is exactly why we separate it from older childhood.
So, within that birth to 8 group, who exactly are exceptional young children? Well, it's an inclusive term for individuals who differ from social or community standards of normalcy, meaning they require uniquely tailored educational programs. The absolutely crucial point here is that exceptional doesn't just mean one thing. It's really more of a giant umbrella term. It includes children with disabilities, children with developmental delays, and, something that actually surprises a lot of high school students when they first hear it, children who are gifted and talented.
Section 2. Understanding the IDEA law. The way we actually treat and educate exceptional children in the United States has drastically evolved over the years, and honestly, it's largely thanks to federal law. Time for another recall question. True or false? The federal IDEA law only covers children 5 through 18 years old. Now the answer here is false. IDEA actually targets early intervention right from birth. And when it comes to special education services in public schools, it covers students from age 3 all the way up to age 21. It is a massive, incredibly sweeping piece of legislation.
Okay, let's dive into this law a bit more because it's a real game changer. IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Now, before this law existed, children with disabilities were legally allowed to be completely excluded from public education. Just imagine that. Families were entirely on their own. But today, IDEA guarantees their rights to supportive programs and a free, appropriate public education. Research consistently shows that the earlier the intervention, the higher the probability of success. And that is exactly why IDEA targets children as early as possible.
Moving on to Section 3. Delays and special needs. Let's see how this law builds our understanding of what it actually means when a child requires additional educational support. So under IDEA, there are 13 specific categories of disability, but there's also this broader category called developmental delay. Now, this is a concept defined by each individual state. It relies on assessments and clinical opinions to identify infants and toddlers who just aren't quite meeting typical developmental milestones. Identifying this delay as early as humanly possible is absolutely critical so we can get them the coordinated services they need for optimal growth. Let's test your recall again. True or false? Many young children with one or more developmental delays also struggle with social and emotional development. The answer is true. Human development is completely interconnected. It's like a giant puzzle. One delay might actually cause another, or it might mask another. For example, a child with a severe hearing disability might also struggle with language development and social interactions, right? That is why early childhood educators must always treat the whole child and not just focus on a single label.
Now, what's really fascinating about this concept is how it completely challenges our assumptions. We constantly compare children with exceptionalities to typically developing children, basically what society calls normal. But normalcy, it's entirely a socially defined term. It is heavily based on cultural and social contexts. I mean, what was expected of a normal child 100 years ago working on a farm is vastly different from what is expected of a child sitting quietly in a modern classroom today. Children who don't fit these constantly evolving cultural expectations are the ones who often face significant barriers.
Section 4. Gifted and twice exceptional.
We're going to shift gears here and talk about a group that is often surprisingly included in special needs discussions.
A lot of people think gifted just means getting straight A's in math or reading. But giftedness goes far, far beyond just academic aptitude. Sure, it includes general intellectual ability, but it also includes creative or productive thinking, leadership abilities, and even visual and performing arts. These kids absolutely require uniquely tailored educational programs, just as much as a child with a developmental delay, because without them, they simply cannot reach their full potential.
Here's a really wild recall question for you. True or false? Many gifted and talented, or GT children, are misdiagnosed as having ADHD. Surprisingly, this is true. Early childhood teachers actually receive very little formal training on GT students. So when young, gifted learners don't have programs tailored to their aptitudes, they become incredibly bored. They start to self-stimulate or act out, and that behavior is very frequently misinterpreted by well-meaning adults as ADHD.
And that leads us to a highly complex reality: the twice exceptional child. This is a child who has remarkable gifts and talents, but also happens to have one or more disabilities or delays. The real danger here is that teachers often have stereotypical views. They might think a disabled student can't possibly be gifted, or a gifted student couldn't possibly be disabled. Oftentimes, their giftedness might completely mask their disability, or their disability might hide their giftedness, leaving the whole shebang entirely undetected.
Section 5. Educational Programs and Services. So now that we know who these exceptional children are, how do schools and communities actually go about delivering support to them and their families?
Well, supporting a child with exceptionalities is definitely not a one-person job. It is a profound team effort. It requires a massive web of collaboration. Depending on a child's specific needs, their educational program might involve speech therapy, audiology, occupational therapy, social workers, medical services, and of course, general education teachers. The tight collaboration between all these professionals and the child's family is critically important.
All right, let's do a brisk, rapid-fire round of recall questions on federal programs. First up, Head Start predominantly serves which demographic of children? The answer: Head Start is a federal program that serves low-income 3 to 5-year-olds who may also have disabilities. It provides absolutely vital early intervention and actually requires a disability coordinator for each local program.
Next rapid-fire question. Where do federal IDEA funds directly go for children 3 to 21 years old? The answer: these federal funds go directly to local public schools. This is to ensure that public schools have the resources to actually provide the services that students with disabilities are legally guaranteed. Just a quick note, though. This doesn't automatically include private or religious schools.
Last one for this rapid-fire section. True or false, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 did not have a direct impact on early childhood programs? This is false. The No Child Left Behind Act focused really heavily on standardized testing and academic accountability. What happened was a sort of push-down effect, where strict academic standards were pushed down from high school and elementary school directly into early childhood. It completely changed the landscape and actually increased the number of children identified with delays.
Section 6. Inclusion and Natural Environments. Finally, let's focus on the actual physical spaces and community settings where exceptional children learn.
Let's check your recall one last time. True or false? The concept of inclusion only applies to K-12 schools. That is definitely false. Inclusion is a major centerpiece of the IDEA legislation across the board. Public schools are legally required to serve children in the least restrictive environment possible. That essentially means children with special needs should spend as much time as possible learning alongside their typically developing peers. And yes, that includes early childhood settings.
For the youngest children, we're talking infants and toddlers from birth to age 3, IDEA mandates that services happen in natural environments. Now don't get confused here. This doesn't just mean outdoor nature programs or setting up a classroom in a forest. A natural environment is simply an environment that is typical for a child without a delay. So for a 1-year-old, the most natural environment is usually right in their own living room. Providing services there allows for optimum growth in a highly secure, familiar setting.
To wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a critical thinking question. Is the term normal problematic when speaking about children? What characteristics actually define normal in our society today? I want you to really think about how labels shift depending on context, culture, and history. If a child doesn't fit the current mold, does that mean they need to be fixed? Or does it maybe mean our definition of normal needs to be expanded? Keep that provocative thought in mind as you review your notes, and I'll catch you guys in the next explainer.